Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode 11 of the Look Out Sir 40k podcast. We've gone all Christmassy because 'tis the season, and also because we went to Grand Tournament Heat 3 at Warhammer World for the Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament, and we spent quite a considerable amount of time talking about it, and it turns out it's incredibly complicated to get about 6 hours of content onto YouTube. We've had to break this down. So if any of you are curious why none of our episodes, or rather our episode 11, turned up on Saturday, it's because we had a logistical error with trying to get 6 hours of content onto YouTube. So what we've ended up doing is what you can see here, which is one of our segments of the Look Out Sir 40k podcast, episode 11, where we're going to be talking about the Grand Tournament Heat 3, our individual armies and performance within the tournament. Now, spoilers, I don't mean to be bold when I say this, but I will say this boldly. I did win that tournament, which is quite incredible. And if you want to hear about that, that'll be in one of the episodes. Funny story, the way I'm kind of recording this is I'm using this same pattern at the start of every one. So if you've had to listen to this 5 times over, sorry about that. But essentially, this episode will be about my Craftworld Eldari army that actually won the whole tournament. I know I already said that in the bit before, but when you win these things, you feel like you should emphasise that and say it a couple of times, because it kind of feels like it's a bit of a hook. I even noticed that Phil in the artwork included it in the little bit of text or whatever you can see in front of you right now. So obviously we're very proud of that. Or I'm very proud of it anyway. And seeing as I'm recording and editing all this, I can make as big a deal of it as I want to, which is, I guess, this. Although, to be honest with you, I feel a little bit shameless as I kind of plug away at this the way I am. But nonetheless, if you would like to hear about how I got on, who I played, and what I did, listen in, because I will tell you shortly after these transitional noises. Woo!
So now we're going to talk about Dan's incredible Eldar list that he achieved so very much with. So first of all, Dan, can you tell us again what is in your army list?
Again? Have I already said what's in my army list?
I think we did a podcast a while ago.
Oh man, yeah, that podcast was. So apologies if anyone since discovering I won discovered our podcast episode. God knows what it was. But as I said in the one that preceded it, that thing was riddled with mistakes that I made when talking about the number of shots that a unit of 5 jet bikes have, as well as the way that certain warlord traits work and all this silly nonsense. So yeah, apologies on that front if anyone went back and listened to that. So I'm going to just go through everything that's in the army and just make sure that it's super clear what it does and why I took the things I took. If that makes sense, Joe?
That makes all the sense.
Well, wonderful. All right, okay. So, contrary to popular belief, I do not feel the necessity to run a Ynnari army, and that's not to belittle or diminish anyone who does. I just don't particularly see the value in them, because I always kind of assign myself to the belief that Elder, or Craftworld Elder, or Craftworld Eldari are good enough that you don't actually really need, dare I say, the training wheels that Ynnari offer you. I appreciate that's a very bold and, divisive statement to make. Obviously, I've ran Ynnari in the past, but I actually, be honest with you, I find the way Ynnari work really annoying, because I don't like the admin. I don't like the way they make me kind of restrict myself in my approach, the whole kind of being certain distances from each other. I think it is more of a hindrance than a help. It's certainly to the way that I play, which is to prioritise a lot more mobility. So Ynnari and me don't overly see eye and eye, mainly just because, as I say, I think the rule set for Ynnari are very bizarre, and I think they kind of completely and utterly go against the established kind of norms that is a game of 40k. So without getting too into the details, Ynnari and I, we're not on speaking terms these days. I never say never, but there you go. What was that, Joe?
They kind of like force you into playing in a weird style as well, in this whole like give and take.
Yeah.
So like I have to sacrifice something to get a bonus.
Yeah.
in games where you're playing things like kill points and having to capture certain objectives, you don't want to be throwing away units just so another unit can shoot.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's the thing. It is what it is. I think, the rules changes they've made to the Yanaris since the end of 7th edition and then subsequently the start of 8th have probably been the best version of it they can make, but I sincerely hope that they get rid of this out-of-sequence actions that Ynnari get to take, because in truth I just think it's ugly. I think mechanically it just doesn't... It just creates too many questions, and I don't want to be spending my whole game debating with my opponent how stuff works, or is that the right interpretation of these very, very lengthy, and yet even though they've been seemingly covered and covered again, still incredibly complex and difficult to comprehend rules. So yeah, regular Craftworld Elder does fine for me. So that's that. So in terms of my army, it's obviously 1,750 points on the nose. We start out with an Eleltok, air wing detachment. I was going to say fly wing detachment there, but it is an air wing detachment, gifting me all of 1 command point, and consisting of 3 Hemlocks, 1 with Embolden Horrify, 1 with Protect and Jink, and 1 with Quicken Restrain. Now, to clarify, I am well aware that the Hemlocks can only use the second of those powers, but they are listed as the entirety of their powers on my army list simply because that's what the powers are called. And even though I'm not using Embolden, Protect, and Quicken, that's the name of the psychic powers, that's how it appears when I copy and pasted it from Battlescribe and then changed it slightly, so that's why it's represented on my army list as both things. In truth, Quicken Restrain is a complete waste of time in my army, so I think on reflection I'm not going to be using that anymore. I probably will be going for 2 Protect Jinx just to keep it in my army if I should lose one of my Hemlocks, and then stick with Embolden Horrify because Horrify is super useful. So there you go. For those of you who aren't already aware, the Eltok, I gotta get better at saying what they are. Chapter Tactic or Craftworld attribute rather, is the ability to receive an additional -1 if they remain outside of 12 inches of their attacker. So if you try and shoot at one of these planes from 24 inches away, you're -2, potentially -3 in exchange for a couple CPs to use the stratagem that gives me an additional -1. So they're a real pain in the bum to deal with. But I feel like I have laboured that point in previous episodes, talking about how freaking amazing they are and so on. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
Oh, God, yes.
So that's that. Next on the list is a Spearhead detachment. This is generating me 1 additional CP as well. And they herald from the Craftworld of Ulfwe. Now, for as long as I've been playing 40k, which is an incredibly long time now, 23 years, which is a scary statement in and of itself. Got into the game when I was about 12 years old. So, yeah, I've been doing it a while now, and I've been playing Elder the whole time. The first thing I ever bought for my Elder army was the old Elder Dreadnought, as it was called back in the day, which went on to become the Elder Wraithlord. But yeah, the Elder Dreadnought was painted in the bone and black colour schemes of the Ulfwe. And as such, being a child, I just went, I'm just going to copy the way it is on the box and not think about what colour I actually want it to be or what that even means. And ever since then, I've been mainly into Ulfwe as my main kind of army. Partly also because painting black back then seemed super easy because it came in spray cans and you just went, psh, and then awkwardly tried to paint yellow over the top of it, as I remember back in the day, which was tedious. To say the very least. Do you remember those days, Joe, of trying to paint old school yellow over the top of black undercoats? Yeah,
there was something about that yellow paint that even on like normal colours, it just never covered properly.
No.
It was, yeah.
And this
was
was
like
before...
a mythical paint, never held.
No, and this was before Duncan was there on YouTube to explain why that is. As a kid, you just went, oh, I don't understand why yellow paint doesn't just go straight over black, but it's not.
White Dwarf wasn't that great at explaining it either.
No.
It was just like, you paint everything this one colour, then you put yellow on, and then it's done.
I envy the children who today don't have anywhere near that level of complexity into getting into the hobby. They just sort of go, What do they say on the internet? Ah, I understand. Plus, also, Games Workshop's Citadel paint system is way better these days than it was back then. Very limited back in the day, I would say.
Oh, it was awful. You had like 2 reds, 2 greens, 2 basically 2 of everything, and then the rest you had to mix all your colours and do lots of layering and stuff, which was a nightmare. If you painted a unit and then you had to colour match it like 2 weeks later.
However, the paints do last. I think I've still got an old, whatever they used to call Acrex Earthshade, Flesh Wash or whatever it was, kicking around that still actually paint and not, dust or whatever they ended up being if you try and keep hold of any from the early 2000 period when they were using those awful screw top lids that they had. So, yeah, credit where credit's due to the old Citadel paints. They're obviously made with a much more toxic compound because they last a lot longer. So there you go. Anyway, so Eldred Olfran is the leader of this detachment. He's not my warlord overall because I don't really see the point in making Eldred my warlord because I use him more like a battering ram. My Eldrad is a lot more ballsy, shall we say, than your average Eldrad because he loves to sit in the middle table being bothersome with Smite and Mind War and Doom and also Guide, which I use in a relatively limited capacity. To be honest with you, the way I tend to cycle things with Eldrad is kick things off with Smite, because as long as he's successfully cast 1 psychic power, all his additional psychic powers are at -1 warp charge or whatever it is. So all of a sudden things like Doom are going from 7 to 6, or Mind War's going from 7 to 6, greatly increasing the viability of that spell, especially when you combine it with the fact that Eldred gets 1 reroll as well, because, Eldred Olfran, and he's also got a free-up invulnerable save. He's not a slouch in combat, although he does only have 2 attacks, which is never especially amazing. But he's survivable, and he does a chunk of damage in the psychic phase, which is ultimately what I take him for. Sorry if you can hear the sound of me flicking through the book there, just making sure that I've not forgotten anything else. So Spirit Link, whenever you pass a psychic test with Eldred Olfran, you can add 1 to the next psychic test you take for him until the end of the phase. So sorry, it's adding 1 as opposed to subtracting from the value, but the same effect is true. I suppose the only weird thing about maybe wanting to do it in a different sequence is that maybe then I would be more likely of rolling the all-important 11 for Smite. But given that Smite from the outset is Warp Charge 5, it always just makes sense to kick it off with Eldrad, so as I'm guaranteed reducing the cost of, or rather increasing the roll that I get for my my psychic tests. So yeah, Eldred's pretty solid. I like him a lot. And Eldrad is joined by 3 units of Dark Reapers, 3 units of free Dark Reapers, 2 of which are joined by an Exarch with a Tempest Launcher, and 1 of which is joined by an Exarch with just the standard Reaper Launcher. And the way that I model that is just using the Exarch model with the Eldari Missile Launcher. So I make sure to check with all of my opponents before the game just to say, hey, I cleared it with the Games Workshop event team before attending. It seemed more sensible that my Exarch looks like an Exarch than a standard Dark Reaper with maybe an orange haircut or something stupid. So it seemed like the sensible option to give him the Eldari Missile Launcher piece and explain to my opponents that that is just a standard Reaper Launcher, which everyone that I played against was super cool with. No real issues there. That was probably the only piece of non-WYSIWYG-ness that I brought. So that was that. That seemed fair enough to you, didn't it, Joe, when we did playtesting? You weren't confused by him?
He was all right, I suppose. He was all right. The playtesting was always the painful part for me.
Oh, right, yeah. You weren't so worried about what he looked like. It was just more the game itself. It was all the fun. Although you beat me once in playtesting, not to do yourself a disservice.
Yeah, so we did 2 games before we left, and I won 1, and then I lost horribly. And we figured out that if you go first, you win, and if I go first, I win.
It's fair to say as well, your Saint Celestine really spun me for a loop. But I'll talk about it later. But playing you with that army was hugely advantageous for me in Game 3. I think if I hadn't done playtesting against you, I would have easily lost Game 3. Because I wouldn't have understood the Celestine matchup nearly as well as I did going into Game 3. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there. So yeah, and then those guys were joined, or rather taken inside a Wave Serpent. So the Wave Serpent has just a Shuriken Cannon and twin Shuriken Cannons, which is no surprise to people in the habit of taking Wave Serpents. It seems to be the most efficient build, although this isn't the most efficient build because I haven't given it the Vectored Engines, and I haven't given it Spirit Stones, although I didn't need to because the vehicle is an Ulfway vehicle, so it ignores damage on 6s anyway. But I didn't give it Vectored Engines simply because when I worked it out and I played it through, I felt like giving 2 members of my Dark Reapers, or 2 Dark Reaper Exarchs Tempest launchers for 10 points was more valuable to me than taking Vectored Engines. Because the thing I was thinking about with the Vectored Engines is if I go second against someone and they focus that Wave Serpent, the Vectored Engines don't mean anything, and effectively they could kill the thing and I would be no better off than I was before, or not. That doesn't even really make sense, but I would have just been, it would have been wasted points, whereas to take the Tempest launchers just seemed like the better option. I think when it comes to Wave Serpents, they're pretty survivable as it is, and I'm not to say that people aren't right to take Vectored Engines. I think they have a place, especially with the LL armies, where it's then -2, because that's super frustrating. But yeah, for me, it was one of those things where I was like, you know what, this is purely there to bring down my drop count, because if I hadn't have put Eldred Ulfran and those 3 units into a Wave Serpent, my drop count would have gone from an overall total of 8 to 11, potentially 12, depending on what I would have taken in the Wave Serpent's place. So at the end of the day, that seemed like the sensible option, and to try and be points efficient with that. So there you go. That's my spearhead attachment made up of Ulfway people. Any questions so far, Joe?
No, because you were for a long time thinking about taking lots of Guardians, and you kind of went off that very quickly.
Yeah, so there was a time where I was contemplating taking lots of Guardians, but then I found that through playtesting that they didn't actually bring much to the table. The thing I liked about the lots of Guardian strategy before was that I could have used them as a front line kind of like defensive barrier, but I found that with relative ranges and things that sort of come into effect, they weren't really doing an awful lot in turn 1, and then they were just sort of hindering some of my overall progress, as it were. I mean, don't get me wrong, as a speed bump, a 20-man unit of Guardians, or a few 20-man units of Guardians with 4-up invulnerable saves, or at least one of them could get a 4-up invulnerable save thanks to Celestian Shield, would have been a bit of a pain in the bum. But I just didn't feel the need for it. It was like a lot of points to not really give me much of anything at all. And again, if I'm honest with you, a lot of this army list was built with this format in mind, because the Eternal War missions from Games Workshop's Chapter Approved 2017 are very specific in their objectives, right? Like at the end of the day, you need to grab objectives at the end of the game for a couple of them, but the majority of them are the cumulative objective things, which Horde armies just absolutely dominate in. So my mindset is just, if I'm going to have to play against these Horde armies that are hoarding points, I need to just be able to kill them all en masse, which is where the overarching strategy for this army list has kind of come from, because effectively, the only real different thing I did was I took a Outrider detachment of Samhan jet bikes. So that is the Warlord of my army, which is an Altark. The Altark is a Skyrunner Altark. Altark Skyrunner, sorry, get the order correct. He has the Phoenix Gem. So the Phoenix Gem is super useful just to try and keep him alive. Now, I'll be honest with you, when it came to all of the things around my Warlord, I didn't actually think there were any good options for him. In the sense that I only took him because I wanted the scatter bikes that I'm about to tell you about. to reroll ones to hit. And I wanted my army to have the ability to regenerate CPs. Now, if I'd made Eldrad my warlord, or I'd taken an Ulfweak character, I could have done that at the start of each battle round on the roll of a 6 and generated new CPs. But one of the things I found with my army is when I am spending CPs, it seems to be 2 at a time. And also, my army doesn't massively rely on CPs as it is. And then I also, in playtesting, discovered that Eldred used to just run forward and die because he wants to operate in that kind of 18 to 24 inch range to be effective with his psychic powers. So I was just finding that every time I was using Eldred, he was dead by turn 2. Sometimes I was lucky and he lived to turn 3, so it didn't make any sense using him. And his warlord trait was pretty uninspiring, especially given the fact all I had to do was give this guy the status of warlord, and then all of a sudden I can start rolling for every time I spend CPs, and on a 6 get one back. Admittedly, I could only get one back at a time, because as we know, the big FAQ has changed the way that worked. But then there came the question of warlord traits, and what do you do with warlord traits? Now, there's a lot of warlord traits that I considered, but in the end, I went with the, what's it called now? The Ambush of Blades, simply because I've got 15 jet bikes, and if I do get stuck in a fight, I'd rather try and do something. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to the GT finals, spoilers, I qualified, but it comes to the GT finals, I'm probably going to change everything to LTOC, and I'll explain some of the strategy behind that. But the warlord trait for the LTOC, I believe, is that every unit within 6 automatically passes morale tests, or doesn't have to take morale tests. So for me, I'm like, actually, for these 5-man units of bikes, this is probably a lot more useful. So yeah, when it came to warlord stuff, it was like, oh well, it is what it is. I mean, thinking about it, I probably could have been better off giving him 6 up, feel no pain, and the extra wound, but he never really gets shot at. So that didn't seem like it was useful. I could have given him +2 to move, but he's a jet bike, so with battle focus, so he can move 22 anyway. I don't think I was ever going to need the extra 2 inches of movement. I certainly didn't in my games. I could have given him the whole reroll thing, but I was like, whatever, rerolls, it's only for him, and he doesn't do anything. And as mad as it sounds, my Ultarch was a token 100 point, get some CPs back and reroll once. That's what he was there for. And that's what he did fantastically. So that was good on his part.
We kind of thought there'd be a lot more like orcs involved, and a lot more like armies of cultists as well.
Oh yeah.
But as a defensive attribute, if you're going to get a wound in, then it might as well actually really hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it doesn't massively matter. Again, it was one of those things where I was just like, I don't know, that I'll give it. Honestly, I actually think it's mental anyway with the Craftworld Elder that just making your Ultarch a warlord gives it the ability to regenerate CPs. So I was just like, that's enough. Like, at that point I'm like, whatever. And the thing is, it's weird because I didn't really ever think that it would matter in any way, shape or form, and it didn't really. So it was that thing where it's just like, it was a bit of a weird moment on that side of things, but we'll move on. So yeah, as I've already kind of alluded to, and as you've probably seen in our posts or maybe read about somewhere else, I don't know, the thing that I did different from every other Elder player there was I jumped the gun on scatter bikes, and I turned up with 3 units of 5 scatter laser jet bikes. And these really are the MVP of my army. They're the things that put in the most work. They are terrifying to horde armies, and they synergize so well with the Hemlocks. So, do you have any questions about the army list, Joe? Everything sound okay?
Sounds all good to me. Why did you go for scat packs over shuriken cannons? Because obviously shuriken cannons are assault, which allows you to move and shoot with them, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also as well, obviously they get the -3 if you roll 6s to wound, which is pretty incredible. But here's the thing. What is the thing that everyone's doing at the moment in 40k when it comes to competitive 40k, or at least as people perceive it? People are taking guardsmen platoons, or not platoons, battalions, and they're sticking them at the back of the board. And they're sticking them at the back of the board because they don't really know what the hell to do with them, because they've spent the points just to regenerate CPs, to generate CPs in the first place. So they're obviously going, battalion, 5 CPs, my Imperial Knights can use those, my Captain Smashes can use those, my Shield Captains on bikes can use those. And that's what they're there for. They're just token gestures. But if you don't deal with those token gestures, they just carry on accumulating points and just being super annoying. But the thing is, they just live at the other side of the board doing nothing. The problem is with the Shuriken cannon variants, yeah, I can move 22 inches and then fire as if I have an advance, so I can fire still hitting on 3+, which again, if the Altark's in range, which he would have been, I'd still be re-rolling 1s. But first of all, I'd have less shots, which, I'd have 5 less shots, which does make a difference. And 2, I'm within 24 inches of something, potentially. Like, don't get me wrong, I could even be in lesser distance, because I've got to try and close the gap to get to these guys, because they're never at the front of an army, unless, of course, you're screening your stuff, which many people do, admittedly. But the point is most of the time, this stuff is hanging out the back. So when you can move 16 inches plus, 36-inch range, you've got a really terrifying threat range there of, what is that? It's a 52-inch range of threat, which is just horrifying. And then you take that with Sam Han, you don't take the -1, so you're punting out 60 shots out of these 3 units, re-rolling 1s, wounding these guardsmen on 2s, and just wrecking them. But the real trick of this army isn't actually killing people in the shooting phase, and I'll talk about that more as we get into the the overarching the battle reports and the overarching synergies. But the idea is that Hemlocks have a -2 to people's leaderships. Now they don't stack, so you're not getting -6 if 3 of them were within 12, but you are getting -2. And most of these backline horde units are leadership 7. They're pretty useless when it comes to leadership tests. So when you've got Hemlocks within 12 covering all your bases, reducing these guys to leadership 5, and you've got 60-odd bike shots coming their way, re-rolling 1s to hit, wounding on 2s, it's pretty terrifying for these guys. And what I'm finding, and obviously then that's comboed with the Dark Reapers. So the Tempest launchers are range 36, you get 2d6 shots with those. They can put in some ridiculous work. And then you combo that with the 48-inch range missile shots from the rest of the Dark Reapers. You're just putting loads of shots into these guys. So what you tend to do is you tend to split fire. So rather than having like every single bike fire at one thing, you go 3 of these bikes are going to shoot at that unit, 2 of these bikes are going to shoot at that unit, and you see what happens with that outcome. Now, normally the unit of 3 bizarrely does worse than the unit of 2. I don't know why that is, but it seemed to happen consistently. I'd be like, I've killed 7 Imperial Guard with or 6 Imperial Guard with 3 bikes, and then my unit of 2 will miraculously kill 7. Now, obviously, that's incredibly fortuitous odds on my part, but it was seemingly happening oddly often. But the way it would go is like you whittle all these units, right? And the golden number when these units have leadership 5 is kill 7 things, because when they're leadership 5, you kill 7 things. They've already got 2 running away, and then they roll a 1. The last one runs away. So literally, if you can get every unit down to 7 guys, they're just dead because they're leadership 5. The only time it's slightly complicated is when they've, like, Tau, for example, and they're using an ethereal to buff their leadership. So in those examples, you need to kind of consider doing something about the ethereal as well. And again, there's things with, I think cultists can use the leadership of a Dark Apostle, and I think Krieg obviously ignore all shooting casualties for leadership tests, which is why when we were talking to Phil, I think it's going to appear earlier in this podcast, I said to him that actually Krieg, against the way my army runs, could be one of the best guard options available, because I can't leadership shenanigans you off the board, which actually massively changes some of my strategies for my army. The majority of the plan is that turn 1, you boost these Hemlocks, which can theoretically move as far as 80 inches, because they've got a 60-inch move when they're on full profile, and then because of the fact that they are wielding assault weapons, they can advance and still fire because they automatically hit with no negative penalties. But you never need to move them that far anyway because, the boards aren't that long. But all you end up doing is just basically positioning all the hemlocks. So normally with horde armies or these kind of armies, they all huddle around the main HQ choices. So you just basically make it so as everything you're shooting at is within 12 of a hemlock. And then you start whittling away units to, like, there's a 3-man unit left there, there's a 3-man unit left there, there's a 3-man unit left there. And then you stop shooting them. And then your opponent looks at you puzzled, going, oh, why didn't you want to kill them? And I go, oh, you'll see. And then you get to leadership tests, and they all run away, which is ridiculously powerful. And I'll talk about that as we get into it, as we go forwards. I think when it comes to the army, it really is just about the devastating effect that it has on horde armies. But it also works really well against Imperial Knight armies as well because of weight of shots, of psychic powers. So to put it in context, most people will run an Imperial Knight as a character of some sort. Now, if you've got 4 Imperial Knights, fine. You're not going to be running all of them as characters, maybe 2, sometimes 3 if you've gone for the old heirlooms situation. But there's nothing funnier than going up to an Imperial Knight and explaining to him, oh, it's a character. Oh, that's useful. I think you'll find that Mind War can target a character. And they go, oh, what's Mind War? Well, you're within 12 of this hemlock, and the hemlock's going to horrify you. Right, okay, yeah, horrify me, understood. Good. Right, now your leadership 6. That's a downer for you, right? Oh, yeah, that's not ideal. And then Aldred over and goes, Mind War. And in one of my games where I fought a knight, I did a total of 7 more wounds to it because I'm leadership 9 with Eldrad. He's leadership 6. I roll a 6. He rolls a 1. And the difference between both is about 7. So I think that's
absolutely devastating as well.
Oh, it's horrifying. You just take a chunk out of them. And if I was lucky, which I wasn't in that instance, but I'd already done three mortal wounds to him with Smite. And obviously that is lucky because that was a regular Smite achieving a D3 result of a 5, I think, to get 3 damage off. But if I rolled that 11, obviously I could have done more there. But yeah, literally, Aldrad in the Psychic phase did 10 mortal wounds to an Imperial Knight character. And that was just his opening act. He just went, there you go. And then he doomed him. And it was like, oh my goodness. And then one of the Hemlocks jinx, and now this thing's got a 4-up save. So he's got to rotate his Iron Shields just to have a regular save. But then you go, right, you're doomed, you're jinked, you're already down to 14 wounds. How do you feel about taking 60 strength 6 shots? And it's like, ugh, not overly great when you're re-rolling to wound. And you're like, yeah, it's not ideal, is it? But there you go. How about rolling, I think it was like 30 saves he had to do. And it's just like, you can't live that. It's just, it doesn't happen. No. And it's that thing where you're like, all right, cool, there you go, poof, done. In play testing against Imperial Knights, I comfortably kill 1 a turn with this army. Comfortably. On average, I kill 1 and get 1 down to half profile. So normally against 4 Imperial Knight Crusaders, which is the usual sort of thing you see sometimes these days anyway, you've practically destroyed their army in the opening volley. And all they can do in return is run at you, and if they've got the Gatling cannons, which hopefully they do, because that's the best thing at killing the Elder Bikes, because it's 2 damage and -2, so I'm rolling 6-up saves because I've only got 4-up leadership, and anything I fail is dead. So every time a Gatling cannon ever shot at one of my bike squads, it just deletes it. But the thing is, if I get the opening turn by some miracle, or I play my Rangers right, and I keep you at arm's length and keep you out from shooting me, you know, I'm gonna go, well, I desperately need to kill the things with Gatling cannons, because that's the only thing that threatens me in Imperial Knight armies. And then once they're gone, it's just hilarious, just mopping them up. I mean, a lot of people, obviously, when I put the list out on the internet, were like, oh, how's it work against Imperial Knights? And it's like, honestly, really, really well. And obviously, as well, you do a bit of shenanigans with it, and it hurts me to do it to the Imperial Knight players, because there's nothing worse than when you're an Imperial Knight player and someone does this stuff to you, but you just exploit the terrain, essentially. You put all your bikes up on stuff, and then yeah, sure, for 2 CP he can do his, what is it, devastating reach or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Is it?
Although I think it's devastating reach. Although I think as a downside of things, I think in the new chapter approved, they actually do a job of defining scenery now,
Oh,
which is a
really?
whole thing. Yeah. Um,
So you're saying that's going to be a bigger negative?
well, it means that you like, for instance, when you take a unit and you hide them on a pile of barrels, or like they're not defined as anything in the game.
Yeah.
Or you hide on top of some containers.
Yeah.
And they're not defined as Adapters Mechanicus scenery or as the Cities of Death stuff.
Yep.
So you go like, well, you can't attack me now
Yep.
because I'm on a building or
Yep.
I'm on the thing. And you're like, oh. So I just dropped a book. So
they're defining that stuff now, are they?
I'm just having a look now, and it looks like they haven't defined them properly.
Brilliant.
A lot of the stuff they still haven't defined as Sexa Mechanicus or Ruins. So you're fine. Carry on.
Well, yeah. Well, and this is the thing, right? I'm actually, I think, quite a generous player when I play against Imperial Knights, because I do make the point of going, right, okay, cool. That's obviously a load of crates which aren't defined for the purposes of Devastating Reach. But obviously, I can agree with you that you should be allowed to use Devastating Reach against that. And there is that whole nonsense, if you position one model inside a Citadel Woods just perfectly, you can't ever get within 1 inch of it because of the way the trees are laid out and how it can't actually enter into them. But again, it's like, there's a certain amount of give and take with that. But even then, you can still muck them around because they've still got to spend the 2 CPs to get up there or try and get there. And yeah, you can really royally muck around your Imperial Knight opponents if you know what you're doing with them. So I recommend to anyone to assert to refresh your knowledge with terrain when it comes to beating Imperial Knights, because if you understand how Imperial Knights interact with terrain, you're really, really far along when it comes to overcoming them and beating them. Because I would be fair to say that the Imperial Knights kind of operate as a bit of a gatekeeper army in 40k tournaments. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Oh, definitely.
Mm.
There's a weird mid-table where they kind of hang around in, and if you're like, if you don't do well in your first 2 games and avoid them, you're kind of stuck spending the rest of the tournament just fighting those and trying to keep at head level, basically.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to deal with the Imperial Knight spam that goes on in the mid-table. Bizarrely, Imperial Knights kind of die off when you get up to the top, at least in this tournament. But yeah, pretty mad. Right, anyway, so yeah, I feel like I've done an adequate enough job of explaining what the army list is. Hopefully that all makes sense. I won't get into too much detail about what my plans are for GT Finals, because ultimately I haven't really defined those yet and it's still 3 months away, but the plan is to still use a variant of this list. I just think I'm going to tweak it and muck around with it a little bit.
Do you think that you'll look at the rumoured Windrider host that has been spoken about?
Yeah, I probably will take a look at that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't actually think at any point we've mentioned from the outset that I won the whole tournament with this army list either. Should we make a thing about that? I know hopefully some people already know that by checking out on social media, but I came first. Out of 114 of some of the best 40k players in the country, potentially the world, I don't know. I played an Italian guy, so I'm going to now take world credentials into this. But yeah, out of 114 of the best players in 40k, I managed to come first, which is something I'm pretty happy with, and
deserved as well, considering the amount of killers that are in that room, as they say. Look, a lot of the armies, and there's a lot of internet talk about what armies are doing best. And there were a lot of armies using 3 hemlocks, but then they were using them as Ynnari because you'd see a lot of, and then there was lots of Eldar, Dark Eldar lists that are running together, which are terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, they are terrifying. And again, there's, I mean, to be honest, and I have to be honest about these things. Did I get a bit of a lucky run? Sort of. But hopefully when I explain to you what my opponents were running, you'll understand that actually what I played against was pretty good and stuff that a lot of other people would have had a really hard time with if they didn't respect the matchups and understand what they needed to do to overcome them. But yeah, I was pretty lucky with my pool of opponents. So not to say that they weren't bad players, it was just bad matchups. And let's start by talking about Ian and his Custodes. So Ian was running a mixture of Custody bikes, shield captains on bikes, and some regular old Custody guard on foot. He didn't have any Imperial Knights, he didn't have a talisman or anything big. It was all just lots and lots of Custodes. And the way the game went was that we were playing Resupply Drop, which hopefully you've heard many times already up till now, and we were playing it in a frontline assault deployment. Now, frontline assault, again, just to remind everyone who doesn't instinctively know what that means, is the deployment type where it's the long 6-foot board edge where the deployment zone kind of begins 6 inches up and then moves across to 9 inches from the centre, to the best of my knowledge. I'm right with that, right, Joe? I hadn't cheated him. Good.
Nope.
Okay, well, that's positive. Now, what happened is I started deploying all my stuff, and he started hugging this line of sight blocking piece of terrain in the kind of far left-hand corner, from me anyway, of the board. So all of his army had started to occupy the far left corner. And that's when I realised that I had an opportunity, probably by about the time I dropped my 5th or 6th unit, that actually I could now position my stuff in such a way as I can Phantasm stratagem, the Eldar stratagem, or the Eldari stratagem, where I can redeploy units to essentially bait him into, continue to commit him to that corner, and then before the game begins, whack everything on the other side of the board from him. And that's precisely what I did to him. So essentially, he deployed his entire army, of which I sort of had my stuff in response. He then put all his stuff in that corner, or rather, I then moved all my stuff to the opposite corner. So right at the start of the game, we're roughly 40 inches apart at the start of the game from anything meaningful, which Joe has run Custodes. Being 40 inches away from your opponent is pretty rubbish for a Custodes player, right?
It's awful. It's like, and like all the your effective range of a Custodes army, like for shooting, I'd say is about 12 inches, because over that 12 inches you're losing a lot of shots.
So if I was to put you in his shoes and you're 40 inches away, you've got 3 units of 3 bikes, 2 shield captains on bikes, and a bunch of people on foot with spears, and they're Custodes. And the mission was a resupply drop, so we don't know where the 2 objectives are going to end up in the end anyway. What would you do?
Hide.
Really? You'd hide, would you?
I would. You got 40 inches between the two of us. I would hide out of line of sight to draw you across the table, or to move your units at angles where you have to. You're kind of sat out in weird positions. Because if you can hide for 2 turns,
it's a lot of stuff to hide, though, Joe. Those are some big models, and don't get me wrong, your strategy is exactly what he did. And it was the worst mistake he could have made, because, one, you can't hide from an army that has a 36-inch range on its guns and has 16-inch movement still firing. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention as well, he did have the Vexilla that gives him -1 to hit, but obviously for Dark Reapers and Hemlocks that doesn't matter. So he hid behind this line of sight blocking piece of terrain, but it didn't block line of sight effectively enough. And I was umming and ahhing how much I would commit to him turn 1, because I respect that shield captains are pretty difficult, but in all the playtesting I've done and all the games I've played, I've never seen a shield captain kill a Hemlock in a Wanna, but he had more than just one over there, so I was a little bit cagey. But you know what? I was just like, no, this is going to be fine. I've got to stick to my guns. I know how this army works. Forward go the Hemlocks. So the Hemlocks go forwards. The Dark Reapers get out of the wave serpent and position themselves so as they're about 36 inches away from some, 48 inches away from, obviously, everything. So I couldn't use all my Tempest launchers. I could only use one of them in the opening volley just because of range and bits and pieces, because I killed too much, basically. And then I positioned my bikes. And essentially, by the end of turn 1, I had killed, through Smite, Hemlock firepower, Reaper firepower, scatter lasers. Even with his -1s to hit, I'd killed pretty much his army. Like, it was more or less all dead. He had one shield captain on bike left, 2 bikes, and about 8 or so custody guards on foot, and his Vexilla and one of his shield captains on foot as well. His whole army was just decimated turn 1. And then we just went off and grabbed a beer, had a chat about it. I said to him, I think it would have been better had you ran at me turn 1, because I was going to get you wherever you went. At least that way you could have done something to me in the corresponding turn with the bikes that lived.
He would have struggled, though.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
he would have, like, best case scenario, if he just ran at you, he would have killed a unit of bikes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Most.
He was completely outmatched by this army. This army was such a bad matchup for him, it was ridiculous. So it was over turn 2. Everything in his army was dead by the end of turn 2. So we didn't even know where the objective ended up in the end, because it was all dead. The only thing I managed to do as well is I sped in the second turn. I was smart enough to have sped one of my bikes over into units over into his deployment zone to get line breaker. And yeah, at the end of game 1, I had killed 1,750 points worth of stuff, and I'd got all the secondary objectives, and I'd achieved 6 GT points. So that was game 1 against Ian. It didn't really go his way. Such is life, right? So there you go. Game 2. In game 2, I played against a lovely man called Tank. Tank from Manchester. He told me his real name at one point, but everyone just calls him Tank. I understand he plays a lot with the No Retreat guys. Very good player, actually. He did really well. He qualified in the top 30. With, I think, his only loss being to me, in fact. Or maybe he drew one. I can't remember the specifics. But his army was 3 battalions of Tau Fire Warriors, characters, and 1 Riptide. So his army was all built around the idea of, I've got 90 dudes with strength 5, adding +1 to their wounds because of all the combos, and I've increased their range to 36. So if you get within half range of me, I am going to wreck your day. There is nothing you can do about that army if you're running Imperial Knights and things like that, because you've got to run into the mid-table to try and deal with these guys, and they are just going to whittle you down with, what is it? Like, it's got to be 270 shots with all of them fire. It's
devastating. And they're wounding everything.
Yeah,
on
4s or something.
3s and 5s.
Yeah.
It's just consistently across the board, which is horrific.
It's awful. So, again, really bad matchup for this guy. So in the last game, my opponent went first. In this game, my opponent went first. We were playing Ascension, and we were playing it on a hammer and anvil deployment, which is basically where we're 24 inches apart, and then I have a 24-inch deployment zone of which he can't enter into with much of anything. And I deployed all my units roughly 4 inches on the board, so I put all my bikes sideways and put them on the back board edge, and went, I am not interested in getting shot by anything. And all he could do in the opening turn was advance his units of Fire Warriors forwards to try and get them in range for the next turn. But little did he know that for the Fire Warriors there would be no next turn, because out of 90 Fire Warriors in my turn 1, I dropped 85. And the way I dropped 85 was that I moved all my models within 36 inches using their 16-inch movement. So bear in mind, I think at this moment in time, his army is roughly 9 inches towards the... so what would that be? It's 24 inch, so plus the 9 is going to be 28... 33 inches or something, 34 inches onto the board. So he's almost at half board length. So I maneuver my stuff in such a way as every one of these scatter bikes is going to be within 36. I maneuver my Dark Reapers, so all of those guys are going to be within 36. I maneuver my Hemlocks, so they're all within 12. And I proceed to do what I said a moment ago, where I go, right, these 3 bikes will shoot at this unit, these 2 bikes will shoot at that unit, these 3 bikes will shoot at this unit, these 2 bikes will shoot at that unit. I'd smited units and got rid of stuff with that. I'd horrified his Ethereal with my... with one of my Hemlocks, reducing that's leadership to 6. I had used Doom, I think, on one of the units, just because I happened to be in range with Eldrad. I did all the tricks that you usually do, and essentially didn't care about his free Crisis Suit commanders, didn't care about his Riptide, because I don't care about that stuff, because I know it can't do anything to me. I know what that army is there to do. It's there to kill you with Fire Warriors. But it's not very good at doing it if they're all dead. Now, funny thing about Tau is that Tau do have a leadership ability where if they roll a 6, they automatically pass because of bonding knife rituals. So I was aware of that. So I probably overkilled a couple of his units at the start just to guarantee first blood, because there were a couple on a few men, and I went, well, I'll get rid of them just to get first blood 100% locked down. But yeah, in his morale phase, he had 7 morale tests to take, and he passed 1 out of 7. Which left him with 5 models out of 90. He literally, everything died. And at that point he went, wow, I've never seen anyone do that to my army before. Like, I've never even thought about using leadership like that. And I think that's one of the really interesting about this army is no one really thinks about weaponizing leadership. No one even considers it a factor in games until it is. And then all of a sudden stuff just disappears. I killed probably, I want to say I killed 60 models in the shooting phase, or maybe 65, and I killed another 25, 20 maybe in leadership. Like, that was amazing, because it put all my testing, all my theory into practice, and I was just like, well, there you go, that's game. And he was like, well, now it's just me shooting with my big toys. And his Riptide did little or nothing, and then in turn 2, I was completely and utterly, like, having a great time chatting to the guy. So I was just, coasting. Didn't quite kill him in turn 2, because I was just mucking around shooting at characters, not even really worrying about the outcome of the game anymore. And then turn 3, everything in his army died. I think my Hemlock lucked out and went, take 12 wounds, or not 12 wounds, I think it was like 8 wounds with the Hemlock on the on the Riptide, and it was just game over. It was like, there you go, done. So game 2 was a fabulous tabling, so the objectives didn't count for anything. So I got all the secondary objectives and
max points, basically.
Well, I was slightly annoyed because his army was only 1,749 points, so I lost out on a point at this point. So I was like, no, I'm off by 1. But there you go.
Savage.
I know, he robbed me. Tank, if you're listening to this, you let me down. Anyway. So then we come to game 3, and this is the one where we played... the frontline warfare on Spearhead. Now this was against Saint Celestine, a bunch of Sisters of Battle, and Imperial Knights. So we had a Knight Crusader, which he'd given the 2+ armor save to. He'd given it Ion Bulwark, so it was Bulwark, so it was free up invuln saves when he wanted it. This guy was also called Ian, and he also was quite a regular player within the No Retreat people. And his army was, Saint Celestine and a bunch of sisters hanging around all over the place and stuff. So he actually went first, and what he did first of all is he wanted to try and get Celestine into a charge, but knowing how Celestine works, I kept myself back. Now, Joe, tell me if I'm wrong with this, but as far as I'm aware, if you advance with Celestine as an act of faith, you now can't charge with her because advancing with her it's still your turn, so she's still advancing your turn.
Yeah, so if you advance, you can't charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, I think Ian wanted to advance and then charge, and we had a discussion about it, and I was like, well, I don't even think you're going to get in even if you do it, so feel free. And as it transpired, he couldn't get close. So I wasn't sure what the ruling was. I know we talked about it, but I wasn't about to get too finicky about it because I was like, it doesn't really matter. So I did that. Now, here's a funny story about Celestine. Do you want to know something funny about Celestine? When she's -2 leadership and you kill a couple cherubs, she can run away. And if she runs away, she didn't lose her last wound, so she can't come back. But
wow,
in order for him to keep her on the table, he paid the 2 CPs for her not to fail a morale test after losing her 2 cherubs in the opening turn. And then in the second turn, he was unsuccessful in having her regain a wound, or rather, she did regain a wound, but she didn't get up to her full 7. She had finished on 6, which obviously then meant that I knew exactly where she was going to be, cherubs regardless, because I could just, when I shot at that unit, she has to take the damage. So then I was able to kind of understand, right, Celestine is in my ranks. I do have to acknowledge that, but all I need to do is segregate my army out onto the far reaches of the board and put them all over the place so as she can't really focus one specific thing. But the scariest thing for my army turn 1 is that Ian killed about 7 out of the 15 bikes that I have turn 1. And that massively changed that game. Now, funny story, that game was so close, so intensely close, and so well fought on Ian's part and on mine. It literally came down to nothing. So the final turn of the game was essentially he charged my Altark, which was the last remaining model that which kept my army alive because of boots on the ground. He charged my model, and because of the Phoenix gem, he killed it. I rolled the 2+, then I resolved 2 mortal wounds. He had one of the sister characters with a really powerful sword within 3. I distributed the 2 mortal wounds onto that, killing her, and then obviously resurrecting my character with 1 wound. I was then able to fight in the fight phase, which killed off the last cherub, and then obviously being that I have the fly keyword, I moved back onto an objective in my subsequent turn 3. So this is turn 3, I'm almost tabled. Now, my Hemlock moves over to where Celestine is on her own, smites her for 3, and then shoots her 5 times, wounding her 4 times. Ian now needs to pass 3 invuln saves to stay alive, and he fails 3 out of 4. So he can't even re-roll it or shenanigans it in any way, and Celestine dies for the 2nd time, and Celestine is proper dead. And at that point, I've got an Altark behind a wall on an objective, which is only worth 1 because it's in my objectives, in my deployment zone, and a Hemlock that is being chased around the board by an Armiger, and or an Armiger Helverin, sorry. And at this point, Ian's got 1 one-man unit of Sisters, and 2 3-man unit of Sisters, all on objectives. So at the end of my turn 3, I've got 3 units of Sisters to kill and only 1 Hemlock, which was damaged, to get it done with. And also I've got an Armiger Helverin trying to shoot it all the time while I'm doing it. So in his turn 4, he shoots at the Hemlock with the Helverin, does it for a total of 2 damage, because I managed to Spirit Stone 1 of the 3 that he did. Leaving me, I think, on 4 wounds, which is a really frustrating number for a Helverin, because that means he definitely needs to get the 2 damage off. And then in my turn, I flew over, smited 1 unit down to 1 wound, and then split the shots to kill. So I used 1 of the Flamers on 1 unit and 1 of the Flamers on the other, killing the 2 units on the objective. So now it's his turn 5, potentially last turn of the game. It all hung on him killing a Hemlock with a Armiger Helverin within 12. So he was only hitting on 4s. and he didn't do it. And then the Halverin, in my turn 5, the Hemlock moves over to where the last unit Sisters is, and kills the two of them with Smite. There's game. He's got one Halverin, which I can't do anything about. I roll the d6. I roll a 2. I could do something about it if we still had a turn, but I roll the d6, roll a 2. It's game over. No more game. And at the end of that, I didn't line break, but I did, and I didn't get first blood. But I did slay the Warlord, and I did get 1,575 points worth of kill points and claim a victory. So that was unbelievably heart-stoppingly close. Like, that was like one of those moments. I saw the frustration on Ian's face when I beat him, because he was just like, I had it in the bag. I was supposed to have won. But the Phoenix gem just brought it back for me. Like, it was just like crazy. I was so happy, because for the longest time, my Warlord was going to be using the old Shimmer Plum, or whatever it's called. I can't even, it's not a plum, but Shimmer thing, the plume, whatever it is. The thing that makes him -1 to hit. And I was like, I'm so glad I took the Phoenix gem. And the reason I took the Phoenix gem was because 3 weeks earlier, you and me were playing at a doubles tournament against that father-son combo, where he had a Farseer with a Phoenix gem. And I went, wow, I've massively underestimated the usefulness of this. And it kept me in the game. It was absolutely crazy. I couldn't have been happier at that point. I was like, my God, I've finished day 1 with 3 wins. I'm going into day 2 with such incredible momentum. I've just got to win 1 game, and I'm in. And all I'm aiming for day 2 is 1 win. But day 2 comes. Any thoughts or feelings at this point, Joe? I appreciate I'm sort of just taking the reins and running with it here. What do you reckon?
Wow, it's all freebies, isn't it?
Well, exactly.
It was, to be honest though, like, the Custode guy was a terrible matchup.
Yeah.
For him, and weirdly enough, there were a lot of Custodes there as well.
Oh, loads.
Like I was amazed about the like really all these people are going to try and win with Custode, but they're always beautifully painted, which is fine. And the Sisters Battle Army kind of like threw me a bit, because they're a really solid army. It's like across the board, 6-up invuns, a lot of melter and a lot of flamers, which your army doesn't like.
It was a terrible matchup for me, really, as I've discovered with you. If I don't go first against that army, it's real tough. And it's only because of the playtesting I did against you that got me to that point where I could even begin to comprehend how to deal with it. I think if I hadn't have playtested with you and your Celestine Knight combination so much, I don't think I actually would have had any chance against the army. I think he would have beat me, because I was like, Celestine's in my rank, what the heck do I do? And it's like, oh, I know what I do. I do what I did last time. I split down my forces, I spread myself out. She can't be everywhere, she's just one thing. So she's got to whittle her way through it. And to an extent, you ignore her to a certain extent. But yeah. So, round 4, I play against a lovely Italian man who has one of those fantastically complicated Italian names that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. But it begins with a G, and is followed by, I think, I can't even read my own writing, a U, and another U, maybe, and another U, and an L. It's a crazy name. Gululululu, something like that. Anyway, sorry to that man if he happens to be listening to this. I will promise to get better. Anyway, that was against an army of mixed Imperium. So that was a shield captain on bike, or rather, sorry, three shield captains on bikes, 3 captain smashes, and an Imperial Guard battalion. Yay! How would you felt, Joe, if you looked across the board at 3 captain smashes, 3 shield captains on bike, and a guard battalion?
Well, oddly for me, that would have actually been a really nice matchup.
Yeah.
But those captain smashes, they do work.
They really do, especially against headblocks.
And shield captains don't put out that much damage, but they don't die.
No, absolutely. So, in terms of how the game went and how it all happened, so he had 3 units of mortars, so 3 3-man units of mortars, a big 21-man blob of conscripts, 3, maybe 4 10-man units of guardsmen, a warlord, which was his company commander, which is supposed to be regenerating him CPs, three units of scouts to try and control the mid table, a handful of sentinels, I think it was 3 sentinels, and then the 3 big scary dudes. So I went first in this game, in this match, and in the opening turn, I basically killed all of his guardsmen, bar the conscript unit, and a few. Oh, he also had loads of the psychers, loads of the sanctioned psychers or whatever they're called, the imperial psycher things. So I didn't quite kill all of those, but I killed his warlord in the opening volley because I was like, well, if you're going to make your warlord just sit in the back and leave a perfect amount of space for my hemlock to pop around the corner and burn you to death, of course I'm going to do that. So I kill his warlord in the opening turn, and I kill, again, I think of the however many 10-man units he had, they were all gone at the end of turn 1. I killed all his mortars turn 1. With hemlocks, because hemlocks love killing mortars. Weirdly, my opening volley with the hemlocks was, I went, well, what I'm going to start out by trying to do is I'm going to shoot 1 flamer at this squad and another at that. And I happened to roll 6 hits and 6 wounds and went, oh, well, that unit of 3's dead. And that unit of 3's dead. Yay! Which he loved. Oh, he was smiling. How he smiled.
So happy.
Oh, so happy. And then obviously a couple captain smashes started coming out of Deep Strike and trying to get involved. I shenanigans my deployment because there was I put loads of jet bikes up on a piece of terrain so as he couldn't actually place Captain Smash next to him. So there was no way he could actually get up to fight. Essentially I just this guy got tabled in 3, maybe 4 turns. So it was a long tabling, but a tabling all the same. Fun story. During the game, a lovely young boy came up and started talking to me about his Elder army, and I felt terrible because this was quite an important match, and even though I tabled him in 4 turns, it didn't necessarily feel like it was always going to go that way, because you've always got to respect the threat that is Captain Smash and Shield Captains and Sentinels and all this stuff going on. So nothing was guaranteed in turn 4, and this lovely lad comes up and he's like, oh, my friend plays Elder, or I play Elder, and I really like Elder, and started telling me all these lovely stories about his Elder army, and I had to be like, I'm sorry, kid, I really feel terrible to tell you to stop, but I've literally got 20 minutes to get this done, so we'll catch up afterwards. And then he kind of had that terrible look of shock on his face where he feels like he's done something really naughty, and I just felt terrible. I was like, oh no, I don't mean to be rude.
You horrible man, you.
I know.
You destroyed that young urchin's dreams.
I know. But he stuck around for a bit afterwards and then left, and then I did actually randomly chat to him afterwards when he was walking around. I was like, oh, I won. Yay me. And it was all lovely. But yeah, look, I mean, again, it's the same thing that I did to the Tau guy. Leadership utterly ruins these armies. You just kind of go, well, there you go, you're all -2, your warlord's dead, all this stuff is dead, you're dead. It's hilarious how that works. So yeah, and if anyone's listening to this, what you're thinking is absolutely right. Other than the 3rd game, I've had the easiest run you can imagine. And that, to an extent, kept going to Game 5, where I played against Tom. I think he's from Honest Wargamer? Honest Wargamer.
The Honest Wargamer, or is it just Boggo Honest?
I think it's Honest Wargamer. It's the it's the guy Rob from Warhammer TV, his channel.
Okay.
So Tom Layton, I want to say. I've got it written down here as Leighton, so I'm going to say it. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I don't actually watch The Honest Wargamer. But I will now, because he's a lovely lad. Although, if I'm honest with you, a bit intense for Game 5 on a long weekend of a lot of drinks and a lot of sleeplessness. He's like, and I mean this in the most loving way possible, it's like he drank too much orange squash. He's had too many E numbers. He's like scatty as anything. He's like, I start playing and he's like flailing his arms around, and when he threw the dice in the first instance, he was like shabam, and I was like, oh my god, like I really don't have the mental faculties to deal with this level of excitement on Game 5.
You're on top table.
Yep, table number 1.
Doing great. He's just happy to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this guy had already qualified in Heat 2 as well. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, he's just showing off now.
He's just showing off. He was showing off.
At the end of day 5, anyone showing any level of enthusiasm, you kind of label as a weirdo. Like, who has this level of energy right now.
I
'Cause I was powered purely by Red Bull and coffee.
I can only assume these people work out and have a very balanced and sensible lifestyle, because when you
who'd do
live
that?
like me on cheese and misery, there's not much happiness to be had at Game 5 of a long weekend, especially given the fact that I actually played about 8 games that weekend, because we did like 3 test games on the Friday as well. So I'd had an intense time, and it's warm and it's stressful and it's all the things. But anyway, Tom, if you're listening to this, you're a fantastic opponent, an absolute pleasure to play. I don't mean to be rude about your mad antics. It was actually really refreshing, although I apologise that it took me a while to get into the spirit of the occasion, because I just was completely caught off guard by it. But anyway, long story short, Tom was running an orc army, and an orc army made up of three boys units, and the 3 boys units were 30 men each. So 90 orc boys, a load of big mechs, a load of weird boys, a plane that has like a weird gun that lifts people up into space, some crazy gravity gun thing that he had.
The dropper, is it? Or the Wazdaka jet or something?
Yeah, something like that. And then he had 9, I want to say 9, I think it might have been more like 11 or 12 actually, now that I think about it, of these crazy gun platforms powered by grots. Now when I looked at it, I went, oh, it's all the zap guns or whatever they're called, the auto hit, really good against flyers guns. He's like, no. And they were essentially range 36, strength 8, D6 shots, -3, maybe -4. It was really good, D6 damage each. It's like, oh my lord. If he rolled any ones, he did a mortal wound to himself. That was his army. It was terrifying, and I can understand how it got to the top tables, because it is a utterly horrifying list. However, I seized on him. So I had the initiative, i.e. I'd already had the +1 bonus because I deployed my army before he did. However, he beat me in the roll-off, which we actually had to do 3 times because of drawn results twice before. And then I picked up the almighty Warhammer TV dice, and I said my prayers to Duncan and whoever else works for Warhammer TV these days. I don't really know. The Irish guy that replaced Rob, that no one can remember the name of, but he seems all right. And I rolled the dice, and there it was, Warhammer TV. And funnily enough, the Irish guy that I was just talking about, I assume he's Irish, it could be another nationality, I could be getting this entirely wrong, was actually stood there watching me do it, and he went, Warhammer TV, good on you, mate. And I was like, yeah, seize the initiative, woo!
You hate seize the initiative. We've discussed many times why.
Oh, I absolutely do.
I mean, and again, how it's terrible.
I absolutely agree with you. It is terrible.
And you're endorsing it. Endorsing it.
I'm not endorsing it. I actually think it is a terrible mechanic, and I stand by that belief, because actually, really, anyway, we're getting off on something that we don't
That's
need to get into.
That's a discussion for another time.
Anyway, so I seize the initiative. We're playing Scorched Earth with Frontline Assault. We positioned all the objectives in the craftiest way we could to try our best to ensure that none of them could have ever been in anyone's deployment zone. I started by putting mine in the middle. He then positioned it 12 in a perfectly aligned way that if it had been any of the deployment types, it wouldn't have gone in any of the zones. I then did the same in response. He then did the same. I did the same. And then we put 1 in an area where maybe it could have been in someone's deployment zone. But as transpired, we had frontline assault. These objectives were not in anyone's deployment zone. So none of that whole sacking it for D3 stuff was in effect. We removed that mechanic from the game entirely because of the way we placed the objectives, which was super cheesy exploitation of the way that sort of mechanic works, but whatever, it's game 5, got to do everything I can. But yeah, so I seize the initiative on this guy, and I know that orcs are annoying because they don't die like other things, because orcs are, first of all, they're toughness 4, so I'm only winning them on 3s. I know, terrifying. Everything in his army's got a 5-up invulnerable save, so it doesn't matter what I shoot at him if he's got 5-up invuns. An orc mob or an orc unit has the leadership of the biggest mob within 6 of it. So in order for me to get stuff to run away, I need to kill a lot of stuff in every single unit. So in the opening turn, I killed of 90 orc boys, I killed... How many was it now? I'm going to say 65 orc boys is what I killed in the opening turn. And it was really frustrating because had he not paid the CPs for a unit to pass a leadership test and paid another CP to kill D3 and have them pass the leadership test, I probably would have killed almost all of them. But as it transpired, that was not the case. And there's also actually as well with this mechanic, there's an interesting, strange logic to it in terms of like, what is the sequence of events that unfolds when you suffer multiple leadership tests across multiple casualties? Because the rule is at the point at which you take the leadership test, you have the leadership of the highest mob count within 6 if yours is not the highest. So if he was to take a leadership test on a unit that was left on 12 dudes and then that reduced to 3, if 12 used to be his best leadership and now it's 3 by some mad series of events, does that now mean that his leadership is now as good as the next biggest unit, which in this instance could have been 8? And then is he taking on 8, meaning that he takes more casualties? And then if that whole unit dies, does the third one then get reduced to whatever its number is, say 6? Again, it didn't come up because of the way that he did it. He stopped himself from having to be concerned by that. But it's a really interesting thing that, again, probably hasn't been fully fleshed out because so few armies are operating in this fashion to try and negate that stuff. So do all the morale tests sort of happen simultaneously, or is there a sequence to that that needs to be observed for the purposes of how orc leadership works in those instances? And I think based off of how my army list works, and I think, you know, it got a relatively good level of attention having one GT Heat free with it, I think this could start to be something that comes up now and again. But anyway, I digress massively. So I killed an absolute truckload of orc boys, but I didn't kill a whole unit of them. And then in his turn, he took the unit that was left on like 2 guys or 3 guys or something, took them off the board and did the whole, they come back with all 30 boys. But I very cleverly deployed all my stuff in such a way to make it very difficult for him to get into any more than one squad. And he failed his charge. And at that point, he just basically looked at me and said, that's going to be game. Because essentially, I just started slowly whittling away at his hordes of big cannons. I killed 128, I killed 112 orc boys in that game, because obviously one unit sort of removed itself and came back as 30, which is crazy difficult to do for most people, so the fact they did that was pretty cool. His flyer didn't really do anything, it just got killed by Dark Reapers in turn 3. His Psychers didn't do a great deal other than doing the jump to capture an objective in one turn. But the final tally of that game was me tabling him, so he was 1,750 points, so I claimed that. I also claimed Slay the Warlord and Linebreaker, but I didn't get First Blood for that one. So I missed out on 3 secondaries, leaving me on a total of 12 secondary objectives. Although, interestingly, if you look at my score result on the Warhammer 40,000 community page, it says I got 13 secondaries, which is not correct, but it wasn't relevant to the outcome because I still won with 1 tournament point, so it didn't need to come down to secondaries as it transpires. So, yeah, it sort of is what it is on that front. And that's it. That's how I won Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Heat Free. Any questions, Joe? Thoughts or feelings?
No, you make it sound so incredibly easy.
It's because it was, mate. I mean, honestly, other than game 3, nothing was hard. It was super easy. And again, a lot of it is down to thinking about what I'm doing in terms of how the tournament works, thinking about what I'm taking, and thinking about how the army works constantly. I know what's good about this army, and I stuck to the same strategy every time. Hemlocks go forwards, melt stuff, screw up their leadership. Bikes shoot them, they fail morale, they run away. Dark Reapers lay in the extra shots, but because they've also got the missiles, they've got the added anti-tank opportunities as well. And the Wave Serpent and Eldred Ulfran just sort of get stuck in after they've done what they're supposed to do, which is just be there to allow me to have 1 drop rather than 4. And then Eldrad is literally a battering ram. I'm just like, there you go, Eldrad! Boom! So, you know, It's going to be really tough for me not to want to keep taking Eldrad because I love him. I've always used Eldrad Offrand in all my armies, even though I know he's not optimal.
He's getting a bit of a points drop as well, apparently.
Yeah, I think he's going down 15 or something, or 10, which is crazy for him. So yeah, all good fun.
It's a horrible list because, like, there's so many components of it that you have to deal with turn one to have any semblance of winning, like, against you, because it's so difficult to kill a single Hemlock. Like it's impossible. And like when I played you, I was running 3 Helverins, and I killed 1.5, maybe 2 when we played. But at the same time, you've got to think, well, I've got to deal with at least a unit and a half of bikes to have any chance of surviving. Because if you leave 2 full units, those bikes will just tear through you.
Oh yeah.
Is there any armies that concern you in the future?
So the army list that I think can actually do really well against it are armies that maybe not many people think as a gooder options for other matchups, but I think anything that can close the distance and dish out punishment is going to get the job done. So if you get an orc 30-man blob of shooter boys and you have to jump them so they're within range of all the bikes turn one, and then you just open up with all those shots, that's going to give me a hard time because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you're absolutely threatening me. Because the thing that the army does that keeps it safe is it plays the distance. And the thing is with 8th edition over and above 7th, 6th, 5th and so on, is that there aren't really very many mechanics anymore that allow you to close the distance game turn one. So oddly enough, a 20-man unit of bolt gun, jump pack, Death Company Marines could probably be totally terrifying because they can advance turn one, then they can move the 12. So then, say they got the 18 off, they've moved 30 inches and have that 12-inch rapid fire range, giving them that 42-inch sort of aggressiveness to them, which actually could threaten me in the opening turns. Same thing with the shooter boys. I think they can jump to be outside of 9, and then they could just start wailing on me with lots and lots and lots and lots of Daka. And I think that definitely has an impact. I think if you've got an army that can by some means get across the board turn one, and you can take a big unit and put it there, you'll probably cause me a lot of problems. But no one's taking that stuff because no one's thinking about that as an option, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
What about like Dark Eldar with Venom spam? Can Cabalite Warriors take a Splinter Cannon in 5, or does it have to be 10?
You're asking now. I think they can in 5, potentially.
If you can, I'd probably go so far as to say Venoms with 2 Splinter Cannons and then Cabalite Warriors with a Splinter Cannon. If you run 4 units of that, they can hammer up the board and give your bikes a real shellacking, as they say.
Yeah.
But you've got to deal with those Hemlocks.
I think on reflection, the thing that I'm hoping to do when the points adjustment comes in is I'm going to take a token unit of Guardsmen to use as a buffer for that kind of...
You mean Guardians?
Guardians. Yeah. So I'm thinking of taking like a unit of Storm Guardians just to have them as a line, just to be like, there you go, to prevent people from using the jump and to prevent people from getting into my lines. Because if I can just create a wall of Guardians in front of them, then I'm not then having to worry about people coming in to me. Because I think, again, if anyone tries to theorycraft the response to this army, things that do really well against it, bizarrely, you could take 3 drop pod tactical squads and it probably would mess these guys up because you just go, bush, there you go, rapid fire. Okay, yeah, sure, you haven't got any AP, but you're still wounding me on 4s and I've only got a 4-up save. And yeah, sure, 10 wounds is reliable, but there's nothing else I can do about it. So yeah, or if you were taking... bizarrely, the Scions with plasma guns would cause me a hard time. But the problem always is is that none of these things can come in turn one, and I do all my devastation in turn one. It's like, it doesn't matter at that point, because you go, oh, my scions will come down, and I go, all right, great. Like, what are they going to do? I've killed some bikes. And like, great. I've killed 60 guardsmen in the opening turn. You've killed a handful of bikes in return. So it doesn't matter. It's about getting stuff that can come across, which is why I say things that use the jump. Things like the Blood Angels that can still then advance with the jump packs and move. Things like, I don't know, Grey Knights have an ability to teleport themselves around, right?
Yeah, they've got they're not teleport homers, but they're a Grey Knight teleporty thing that makes them move something like 20 inches a turn.
Yeah, so Grey Knights with Stormbolters have caused me no end of trouble. So there are things that can get it done, but they're not things that anyone's thinking about. And I think that's the thing. It's gonna be for the next kind of emerging meta to kind of define what these do. Because look, I'm not making myself out to be omnipotent or incredible in any way, shape or form. I just thought about it for a long time, figured it out, and did really lucky and did really well with it. And the thing is that, like, I think people will look at this. I already know people have looked at this. I've had lots of feedback on it from lots of people. I've had lots of discussions with people about it. People have contacted me asking me for the details, asking me every little bit about it. And I hope that for those guys listening to this, that this really helps you understand how it works, because it's not even optimized. That's the ridiculous thing. All I've learned since winning this thing is people going, "No, it's not even that good." And I'm looking at it going, "God, it really isn't that good. Wow, yeah. How did I win with this?" Because it's like, I don't understand, but I did. And, that is the crazy thing. And I played some very good players, but I did get a lucky run, and it did end up working out in my favour. But this is the thing. Other people with other armies couldn't have beaten the stuff that I beat to get to where I was. So there was a plan to it, right? Like, I don't think your army could have beaten 90 Fire Warriors, could it?
No. Like, I could, if I'd gone first against them, I could have used my Stasi's ability to bump a unit of 10 Vanguard forward before the game, and then move them forward again. So that's like 10 guys. So that's 30 shots hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, but then I'm wounding on 4s. So at most you're getting 15 wounds, let's say. Yeah. My Night Warden's putting out 12 shots, but he's like 14 shots, hitting on 3s. You can give him the re-roll 1s, so say they're exploding. So you get 12 hits, and then you're wounding on 2, so you're getting 10. So, and then the Helverins, they do a lot of heavy lifting, but they ain't putting out enough shots.
Yeah.
I would struggle against him. If I went first, I might kill 30, but then the rest and that Riptide will drop my knight turn 1.
Oh, easy. Yeah, and that's the thing. Don't get me wrong. There is always an element of luck in a game of dice, but the strategy was relatively sound, and I'm really happy with the way it went. Obviously, because to win GT Heat 3 was truly incredible. Because I think, when I heard about everyone talking about it in advance of it, when we bought the tickets for it, Phil immediately kicked off going, or not kicked off, but chimed in, I should say, going, everyone on the No Retreat forum or WhatsApp group or whatever it is talking about how they're going to be heat free. I think we've made a mistake. This is going to be super competitive. And then I listened to various other podcasts talk about it. I listened to people talking about what they're taking. And yeah, it was super competitive. I think this probably was, and I hate to sound like I'm boasting when I say this, but that probably was the most difficult heat to qualify in. So to win it is something I'm really proud of. And again, I just want to say huge thank you to everyone I played. You were all amazing opponents, and you played an incredible game. To the organisers, obviously, I doubt they listen to this, but if they do, thank you very much. As I said to you on the day, absolutely blown away by the event. It was one of the best I've ever been to. Highly recommend anyone thinking about going to Warhammer World events to really do it. It's the best weekends in this hobby, in my opinion. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
The events are amazing, and you always learn something from the games. And every loss is a lesson, and if you don't learn from those, you'll never progress.
Yeah.
But these events are great because it's 5 really tough games against 5 people that want to win.
Yeah.
And they'll do whatever they can to win.
Yeah.
And you know what you're getting into. Walking through that door and you see all those people, you go there's 120 people here. They all want to walk away with that first place.
Yep.
But everyone's happy to be there, and all your games are super fun. Like the games I won ended just as happy as the games that I lost.
Yep.
Because you're just joking and you're having a drink. Every single one of my opponents offered to buy me a drink.
And there we go.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're going to go and do events, the Warhammer World ones are the best. They're a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
But you get dinner included. So that's great.
So yeah, in essence, that was my experience at Warhammer Worlds, Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Heat 3. Like I say, I hope that makes how it worked super clear. Not going to lie, obviously got lucky in some instances, but, I played my heart out and I did everything I could to make the army list work to its full potential. And, hopefully hearing the army list I came up against, there was... let's not be unfair to him, but the Custodius guy I played in the first game was the weakest opponent I played. All 4 other matches were unbelievably powerful armies. Those armies, all of them, could and would win any tournament happening anywhere in the world right now. They were all strong players with incredible armies. And to put it in context, every single person I played, bar the first guy, finished in the top 30. So, to say it was an easy run is probably doing myself a disservice, but yeah, it was a fantastic time and highly recommend it. And with that said, I'll transition to whatever comes next, with Joe making some transitional noises. And that there concludes this segment of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, episode 11. Thank you as always to everyone who supports the show and checks us out here on YouTube. If you would like to listen to the show, or the podcast rather, in its entirety, please go over to Spotify or iTunes or any of the other available podcast platforms and check us out in our entirety. Otherwise, there will be other episodes of this broken down into all the various sections here on YouTube. So if you'd like to listen to more of the content from the Grand Tournament Heat 3, please either check out the full podcast available on all the various podcast providers that we work with. Not to say we work with them, that would imply that we're actually getting some sort of revenue out of this situation, which I assure you, we are not. But nonetheless, check us out on all the podcast platforms that we choose to pay to put ourselves on. And obviously, please let us know what you think throughout the process and so on. We're always appreciative of the comments and obviously, really appreciate all the support. So this potentially is the last podcast that we'll put out in 2018. There is talk of us doing some kind of roundup thing that may or may not end up on the YouTube channel / podcast providers before the end of the year, but I have to be honest, I'm not entirely hopeful, so I wouldn't want to promise it, but I will throw it out there as something that might happen, because you never know what might happen. Depends how we feel and how it goes. But we really hope you've enjoyed our roundup of Warhammer World's Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Heat 3. Obviously, huge thank you to Games Workshop and to Warhammer World for putting on what was an absolutely fantastic event. Me and all the guys absolutely loved the weekend. We had a fantastic time, and as we've probably laboured the point throughout the process, we would encourage any one of you listening to this, if you're able to do so, to attend some in the future, because they're super fun. So with that all said, thank you very much. Have a fantastic Christmas and or New Year's, depending on how this all goes. As I said before, we don't exactly know. But nonetheless, hope you have a great one. Thank you very much for all the continued support, and we'll hopefully chat to you very, very soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.